You can get approved for a house that slowly ruins your life, and no one will warn you. The bank will smile, the agent will celebrate, and you'll spend the next 30 years wondering why success feels this suffocating. It's midnight. You're in bed, phone inches from your face, scrolling through real estate listings again, and every single house that doesn't look like it's about to collapse costs around $500,000. Not mansions, not luxury homes. Just normal houses. Outdated kitchens, beige carpet, builder-grade everything, maybe a yard the size of a bath towel. And somehow, with a straight face, the listing calls it a starter home. That's when the doubt creeps in. You start replaying your entire adult life in your head. Did I miss a promotion? Did everyone else secretly double their income? Am I just bad with money? Because the math in front of you doesn't match the life you're living. You have a job, maybe even a good one. You're doing what you were told to do. And yet, according to the housing market, you're still somehow not enough. And here's the part no one wants you to slow down and think about. What if the problem isn't you? What if the problem is that we've been taught to ask the wrong question? Not, can I get approved for this house? But, can I afford this house and still have a life? Because there is a massive difference between a bank saying yes and your nervous system being able to handle the consequences of that yes for the next 30 years. Welcome to Quietly Broke, the place where we talk about the financial realities people are quietly struggling with but rarely say out loud. And today, we're going to do something uncomfortable. We're going to stop asking what the system allows, and start asking what your life can actually survive. Before we go any further, if this kind of honest, no fluff breakdown helps you feel a little less alone, consider subscribing to the channel. It's the best way to support Quietly Broke and help us keep making videos like this. Now, a quick question for you, and I want you to answer honestly in the comments. Which matters more to you? A. Owning a home, even if it means constant financial stress. B. Financial breathing room, even if that means not owning yet. Comment A or B below. If you follow that question all the way to its logical conclusion, you're forced to slow down and look at the math everyone else rushes past. Because once you stop asking what's normal and start asking what's actually sustainable, the illusion begins to crack. In dozens of US markets today, $500,000 isn't a luxury price. It's the floor. That number doesn't buy status. It doesn't buy comfort. It buys a very average house within driving distance of a major city. And that's important, because the market treats this price point as if it's something most people should reasonably be able to handle. Now place that next to income. The median household income in the United States hovers around $84,000. Which means we're quietly asking the average household to afford a home that costs roughly 6 times what they make in a year. Historically, that ratio would have been considered reckless. Today, it's framed as adulthood. And when that feels uncomfortable, you're told not to worry. You're told that everyone stretches at first. You're told that your parents did the same thing. You're told that if the bank approves you, it must be fine. But approval is not affordability. Approval simply means the bank believes you can survive the loan. It says nothing about whether your life will feel stable once you're inside it. The first place this fantasy collapses is the down payment. 20% on a $500,000 home is $100,000 in cash. Not invested, not borrowed, cash. Meanwhile, the median American household has single-digit thousands saved. The gap between those two numbers isn't a budgeting problem. It's a structural one. So most people do what the system nudges them to do. They put 5 or 10% down and tell themselves they'll refinance later. What they don't focus on is what that choice actually costs them. Because the moment you don't put 20% down, you unlock private mortgage insurance. PMI isn't a safety net for you. It's a monthly penalty for not already having money. You pay it every month. And it protects the bank, not your future. Then comes the mortgage itself. At current interest rates, borrowing $450,000 means a payment somewhere near $2,800 a month. And this is where most affordability conversations quietly stop. Because that number already feels heavy enough. But that number is not your housing cost. It's only the price of borrowing the house. The market trains you to fixate on that single payment because if you looked at the full picture too early, you might walk away. And walking away is the one outcome the system never wants you to seriously consider. So the illusion holds, just long enough for you to believe that $500,000 is something you can make work, even when the math underneath it is already starting to bend. And once you step past that single mortgage number, the reality most people never fully run begins to show itself. Because owning the house doesn't end when the loan is approved. That's where the expenses actually start. The moment the keys are in your hand, you inherit an entire ecosystem of costs that don't care how carefully you planned your monthly payment. Property taxes show up whether your income goes up or not. In many areas, that's several $1,000s a year, quietly broken into a few $100s every single month. It's not optional, and it only moves in one direction over time. Then there's homeowners insurance. What used to be a relatively boring line item has become volatile. Fires, floods, storms, climate risk, insurance companies have adjusted, and homeowners are the ones absorbing it. A few $100s a month, just to protect the structure you're already paying for. And that price can jump with very little warning. And then there's maintenance, the cost everyone intellectually understands but emotionally ignores. Because it doesn't feel real until it happens. Until the water heater fails. Until the roof leaks. Until the HVAC dies on the hottest week of the year. The rule of thumb is about 1% of the home's value annually. Not for upgrades, not for improvements, just to keep the house functioning. On a $500,000 home, that's thousands of dollars a year set aside for problems you can't predict and can't delay forever. These aren't edge cases. This is normal ownership. When you stack it all together, mortgage, taxes, insurance, maintenance, and often PMI, you're no longer looking at a payment that feels abstract. You're staring at a total monthly housing cost that lands north of $4,000. And that number assumes nothing goes wrong. No special assessments, no surprise repairs, no sudden spikes. Now this is where the conversation usually turns uncomfortable. Because when financial advisors talk about affordability, they don't start with what the bank will allow. They start with what your income can support without consuming your entire life. Traditionally, housing around 28% of your gross income is considered safe. At this cost level, that means earning close to $200,000 a year. Even if you use the bank's looser standard, the one that pushes people right up to the edge, you're still looking at an income well into the mid-six figures. And yet homes at this price are being sold every day. Which forces a question most people never pause long enough to ask. If only a small fraction of households can afford this safely, why does it feel like everyone else is somehow making it work? The answer is uncomfortable. Many aren't. They're surviving, not affording. They're absorbing stress in exchange for ownership and telling themselves it's temporary. They're hoping nothing breaks, nothing changes, and nothing interrupts their income. This is the point where housing stops being a lifestyle upgrade and starts becoming a stress amplifier. And before you even look at a real family's budget, the numbers alone are already telling you something important. This house doesn't just require income. It demands margin. And when you take that abstract math and place it inside a real household, the consequences stop being theoretical and start becoming painfully human. Picture a household earning $160,000 a year. 2 professionals, stable careers, no reckless spending. This is the kind of income we're told represents making it. Upper middle class, safe, comfortable. On paper, it looks solid, but paper doesn't pay bills. After federal taxes, state taxes, payroll deductions, health insurance, and modest retirement contributions, that income shrinks fast. What actually lands in their bank account each month is closer to $9,500. That's the money they have to live on. Not a concept, not a projection, cash. Now subtract the real housing cost we just walked through. Roughly $4,300 a month disappears immediately. Nearly half of their take-home pay is gone before they've driven to work, bought groceries, or turned on a light. What's left has to carry everything else. 2 cars, because commuting isn't optional. Payments, insurance, fuel, student loans, because those degrees were part of earning that income in the first place. Groceries that cost far more than they used to. Even when you're careful. Utilities for a larger house that demands more energy, more water, more maintenance just to function. By the time the month settles, The margin is thin, not non-existent, but fragile. And fragility is where stress lives. There's no real emergency fund growing in the background. Not because they don't believe in saving, but because every dollar already has an assignment. There's no room for meaningful investing beyond the minimum needed to feel responsible. And there's certainly no buffer for life being unpredictable. This is where the emotional cost shows up. It's checking your account before buying groceries. Not because you're irresponsible, but because you're cautious. It's putting off small repairs and hoping nothing escalates. It's that quiet tension that never fully leaves. Because you know one unexpected expense will force a trade-off you don't want to make. When the water heater fails, it's not an inconvenience, it's a crisis. When a medical bill arrives, it doesn't get absorbed, it gets financed. When a car needs major work, you hesitate, calculate, delay, and hope. And this isn't excess. This isn't indulgence. This is a household doing everything right and still feeling like they're walking a financial tightrope. What makes this especially unsettling is that this household earns far more than most. They are not an outlier on the low end. They are an example of how high the bar has quietly moved. If $160,000 produces this level of pressure, imagine what this looks like at $120,000, or $100,000, or the median income that sits well below both. At that point, the idea of comfortably owning a $500,000 home collapses entirely. Not because people are lazy, not because they failed to plan, but because the structure itself demands a level of financial slack most households simply do not have. This is what house poor actually looks like. Not chaos, not extravagance, just a constant, low-grade anxiety that turns homeownership into something you endure rather than enjoy. And when you zoom out from that household and look at the system surrounding them, the final piece clicks into place. Because no one involved in the transaction is actually responsible for whether this works for you long term. The bank's job is to issue a loan that doesn't default immediately. The real estate agent's job is to close a sale at the highest possible price. The insurance company prices risk. None of them are measuring whether your life will feel stable 5 years after you sign the papers. So when you end up stressed, exhausted, and stretched thin, the system shrugs. Technically, everything worked. This is how house poor became normalized. We reframed financial strain as maturity. We told people that anxiety is just part of ownership. That struggling is a rite of passage. That if you can just hold on long enough, it will all be worth it. But there is no badge for barely making the payment. There is no reward for sacrificing your peace so you can say you own something on paper. Real wealth doesn't start with a deed. It starts with margin. Margin is what lets you handle repairs without panic. Margin is what allows you to invest consistently instead of reacting to emergencies. Margin is what lets you make decisions based on opportunity instead of fear. And a house that consumes most of your financial capacity doesn't build that. It drains it. This is where you're allowed to do something that feels almost rebellious. You're allowed to stop. You're allowed to look at the numbers honestly and decide that this doesn't make sense right now. You're allowed to rent without shame. You're allowed to choose a cheaper home, a different market, or more time. Waiting is not failing. Walking away is not weakness. There is no prize for buying a house that makes you miserable. No one hands you a trophy for constant stress. And there is no moral obligation to participate in a market that demands you trade your stability for status. Sometimes the most financially responsible decision isn't pushing harder or stretching further. It's recognizing when the math doesn't support the story you've been sold. And choosing not to play a game that only works if nothing ever goes wrong. That choice doesn't make you behind. It makes you honest. When you strip everything back, this entire conversation comes down to one uncomfortable truth most people are never encouraged to face. Just because something is normalized doesn't mean it's healthy. For years, homeownership has been sold as a moral milestone, a signal that you've made it, that you're doing life right. But when you look honestly at the numbers, you start to see how many people are quietly paying for that story with stress, anxiety, and a complete lack of financial breathing room. The real danger isn't buying a house. The danger is buying a house that consumes your margin. Because margin is what protects you when life stops cooperating. It's what turns emergencies into inconveniences instead of disasters. It's what allows you to invest, to take career risks, to rest, To think clearly. Without margin, even a high income can feel fragile. The deeper lesson here is this: affordability is not about what you can technically survive. It's about what supports a stable, flexible life. A decision that locks you into constant pressure isn't a step forward, even if society applauds it. And choosing not to make that decision, especially when the math doesn't work, isn't failure, it's self-respect. So how do you apply this right now? Start by redefining success for yourself. Run your numbers honestly, including stress, sleep, and risk tolerance. Prioritize margin over appearances. Make choices that leave you room to adapt, not just obligations to meet. And remember that wealth isn't about owning the most impressive asset. It's about having the freedom to handle whatever comes next. Before you go, I'd love to hear from you. Do you believe financial success is more about ownership, or about flexibility and peace of mind? Please share your perspective in the comments so everyone can learn from each other. And if this kind of honest, grounded conversation resonates with you, consider subscribing to Quietly Broke. Your support helps keep these conversations going and gives the channel the motivation to keep creating meaningful content.